issues. There's not going to be much to cover because there is an issue, but I can talk about those details later, guys. No problem. Anyway, so in essence, what is happening? I have to keep my voice a bit low. So in essence, let me just bring the microphone ahead. So in essence, we covered what memory aspect of the investigation is, but we never talked about what is exactly happening in the memory and how we can get access to those memory section, provide some understanding of the memory arrangement was basically what we just covered, but not actual detail of how we can get into that memory, use the memory forensic investigation to dump hashes, passwords, and things like that. So for now, let's do a quick analysis here, and then that analysis will help us to understand bits and pieces, if that makes sense. Okay. And before I go ahead, any question? And by the way, guys, remind me to talk about the project. As I posted the project, I want to make sure that you guys are all synced up. Okay. Fantastic. Wow, where is it? Give me one second, guys. Okay, I found you. All right. So once we do a memory image, the volatility framework works off of a profile. The reason that I'm saying is this will be a bit different is that volatility 3 calls things different. So instead of profile, it calls it images. So what you see in this slide deck is volatility 2, which you can still use the standalone version of it. Here, so this is the volatility 2.6 that you can indeed download and leverage. It's loading for whatever reason. It's working. It's just this website is down. Yeah, for whatever reason, guys. Anyways, back to this for whatever reason it's not working. Anyways, what I was talking is that the profile versus image and then basically some of the wording, it could be different, but don't pay attention to those because everything works the same way. It's just a matter of context changes, keyword changes. So the aspect of the structure of volatility is that it runs on a framework, which means that it has plenty of plugins that can help you to analyze different part of the memory sections, including the different crash files or hibernations and so on and so forth, right? So we'll talk about the plugins at the later stage if we want to. I think we will at some point, but the end goal is that you guys use volatility to perform some analysis. So have you guys started playing with the recall and GRR through that lab? Are you able to actually leverage some memory analysis through those tools? Guys? Okay. maybe I'm missing in here. Yes. Okay. So can you tell me? Okay. So what did you guys did as a hunt, for instance, in using that memory hunt process? Can anyone explain to me just as an example?
For example, how many library attached to the WinLogon?
How many?
DLL library attached to the WinLogon. So
Okay.
we injected DLL to the WinLogon process.
Okay. What else, guys?
TCP connection or UDP connection or
Okay.
all the.
Okay, fantastic. So you could basically see some level of analysis in terms of I would say live forensics, let's call them, meaning that you want to see what is happening at the moment in regards to the active connection, mapped DLLs to the processes, what are basically getting imported, things like that. You talked about injection. We'll talk about injection, what that injection is today. But in essence, that's basically a framework that can look into recovering the key. So, Ahsan, you were saying the BitLocker recovery. Did we cover this slide deck?
Is it just for my my self-study?
Okay, got it. Yeah, we talk about that actually. Recovery password from memory and things like that. We'll talk about them, but let's leave it at the later stages. We have to actually. I was planning to do a live demo, but my VM for whatever reason is not coming up, and I'm just using this Vault 3 volatility 3. And some of these commands that you see that are working off of that version is not basically working. So for whatever reason, the server is not responding. But we'll come back to it at a later stage anyways, guys. So some basic command, let's cover that. So again, guys, we don't need to download Volatility 3. You can work off of the existing standalone. Still, it's being supported. It's not that supported. They are moving toward that model, but yes, you can still use SIFT. SIFT is running on 2, I guess, but in essence, that's what you can do. Okay, so where are we basically? Yeah. So once you start, you use Python volatility and you put the file name. This could support different file formats. Lime being one of them, which is something that most of the investigation tools are supporting nowadays, especially the ones that you just work with, like surge collectors and so on and so forth. There are other basically memory dumping tools. What did you guys use in the past or now or whatever?
I use DD and FTK imager.
Fantastic. So here's always that reference of yours when it comes to volatility, especially on volatility 3. So you can do a lot of basically, you can use a lot of tools depending on what is that level of investigation. These are the things that we could use WinPMM and DD, as you mentioned. But these are the ones that we basically also using. But in Surge Collector, it just comes with the artifact collection anyway, so it just comes with it. If you guys remember that. So once you have that surge, let me just show it to you. Where is it? So once you have search collection, all the collection, including the files, were basically collected for you, and the memory was sitting in a different folder. So you see it as a data line. That was a memory of a 4 GB RAM. So even sometimes you would see actually that you could dump the passwords and hash files and things like that from this. So everything is pretty much in here. Okay. Now let's go back. So once you dump the memory and you have that memory dump, you would use Python vol -f profile, and then you define that profile, and then you execute the plugin. And we will talk about what plugins are there. So such as the ones that you set, netlist, net connections, network, or netestat, or pslist, or ps3, or malscan, or malfind, things like that. Nowadays, they are actually supporting so many other contents, and that's basically about it. Okay, any question, guys? So far, so good. Give me 1 sec. I'm guessing I have some offline file. So I'm just asking my team so that they can share my offline training files. For that one, guys, I have to stop recording because I don't want it to be recorded. But that's something we can discuss. And please don't be smart and take screenshots and all that, because you're not allowed, right? If you do that, I can basically pursue you, because I just want to make sure that you guys will get through the topic as far as you guys can. So we'll get there. So establish that comment. Everyone heard that comment? If you heard, please raise your hand. I have 4 people that haven't raised their hand. I don't know if they are coming back or not, but I can call them later. So keep your hands up, basically, until I come back and discuss this. Okay, so then we provide that volatility pi, and we'll get that info command back. Once we see that info command back, we'll see the results back, basically. So with regards to the profile, it is very important, because if you don't set the profile properly, Windows doesn't know where to actually look for those artifacts. Sorry, the volatility doesn't know where to look for those artifacts in the memory section. So far so good, guys? Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead. So one of the other plugins that you can use that can scan for you and give you suggestion is that the KDebugger scan, or kernel debugger scan, basically. So it just looks at the data and come up with basically some of the results, if that makes sense. So this is a plugin that would show you a possible way of identifying a plugin if you don't know what this image is basically being retrieved. So that image info plugin, image info switch, will use this plugin to demonstrate to you what is this operating system if you couldn't. So if you are going to manage multiple volatility basically imaging, it's always best to set that as a separate profile, because especially if you are investigating an enterprise, you collect a bunch of artifacts. This is how you would basically receive your set profile. So this is going to be your set profile, and you would say, just want to always have my images in there. So once it is set, whatever you set as a vol Python, it goes and uses these basically environmental variables to set the value, and it can basically tell you what is inside that memory. Okay. Not big of a deal. So we can do some password recovery. So let's say this one is showing you how to provide a proper password recovery. So this is leveraging Join the Ripper, right? So I'm going to leave it as this, so you can go ahead and discuss, because there's much that we want to cover. But in essence, we'll leverage John the Ripper with the defined type of password. So it's NT, what type of hash is it, NTLM. And then you would basically point the hashes that you collected through that volatility plug, point it to the dictionary that you could use for the brute force, and you use John the Ripper to leverage that for cracking the password. This is just one way. Obviously, once you have your NTLM hashes, you can do it with different ways, such as there are so many online NTLM crackers as well that you can leverage. Make sense, guys? Okay, yes, sorry. So we did basically, we started with the Python vol.py -f memory font. This is a raw memory, and then we scanned it through kernel debugger scanner, and we identified this as a profile. Now, this is the base address for the kernel. We discussed about like how kernel is basically set up, but now what is important for you guys in the terms of next system is this value, which is your, apologies, let me just put this on pause. Now, so now we have so we use that KDebugger to discuss that. Now we know through the KDebugger, so remember, the input of the thing is always the profile, and then what plugin you want to use, right? So coming back to here, we identified through the KDebugger. This is the KDBG here, the KDBG scan will give you what profile it is. So you captured now the profile. So this is the profile that you would use for any future services. By the way, you could basically set it like last time as an environmental variable. Where is it? Here. If you want to just running always, right? And volatility always goes and look at that value. So far we established that we ran a KDebugger. We know the profile. We know where the image is, so if we can even skip this if we don't want it. But so far we have the profile. We pointed to through -f to the actual profile, and then run PS list or process list. Right? So this process list, what it does is that does list all the processes. Okay, it just lists you what is running, what is not running. Okay, so we have that, and now we can define the Hive list by running this. If basically we want to set it manually, so we get the addresses through running the Hive list. And once it is live and existent, we can then use this hash dump with this switch to dump all the hashes. Okay. And this is the SAM Hive of your register that is loaded in the memory, and S is in the system Hive, basically. So that's basically SAM Hive, and this is the system Hive. All these hashes are not dumped into the hashes.txt. So this is one way. Now someone wrote a plugin called hashdump, and you can just use directly to the hashdump to get these. So this plugin has the capability to actually look at that for you and take it from it. That's the previous command list. Yeah. So these are basically, again, when you get to the hashes, it's just a matter of running the commands against the hashes. So take a look at this. Sorry, there was a question. Yeah, for sure. Anyways, so just to give you, yeah, that's where I was basically going to answer Hassan's question. So see this Hive list? So you would basically use this Hive to see where the SAM is, right? And where is the other one? That's the system. So then you have the two values. Makes sense, Hassan, now?
Quick question: did Microsoft release the offset for the in the memory for any operating system?
So they have a research. So here's the funny story. So I know the developers of the volatility, and there is this company called what is it called, guys? Oh man, we use their tool every day. Axiom Cyber, Magnet Forensics. I'm actually going to invite one of the developers of Magnet to show you, one of the ex-developers of Magnet, who's actually an incident responder in my team, to demonstrate to you how this whole thing works. But they actually use the volatility and to do many of those activities. And here's the funny part to your question. Volatility is doing a lot of research themselves through undocumented APIs and memory mappings and things like that themselves. So that's why they are like unique in their position, right? Even when these big guys who sell their software on top of volatility have money to hire people, they don't have money to hire right people who are like the minds behind the volatility. So again, I don't want to get into the confidential information, but there are not challenges to set some profiles in some of the solution, including magnets that are based off of volatility, because volatility is now changing their licensing model in what version 3. So to a short answer to your question, yes, they do a lot of research and analysis, and that's why they're top in the market. Still, many of the vendors, you saw OS Forensic on my desktop. So this is basically one of the other tools that that is leveraging volatility. So pretty much all the top tools, they leverage volatility, and yes, short answer is yes, they do a lot of research. But starting volatility 3, things are getting changed from licensing standpoint, right? So anyways, this is their they call it now VSL. It is aligned with the goals of volatility community. So anyways, back to the story. Any questions so far, guys? Okay. All right. So I'll leave this one with you guys. We can probably run as an example, but it's gonna be a full brute force, so it's gonna definitely take some time. But you can get some fun stuff. Anyways, we'll leave it at that. Other things that you can do is basically work with hibernation files and do some analysis through the hibernate files, because it's basically the map of the whole memory in there. Okay, now let me just bring up the second part of the lecture on the volatility. Okay. So we just talked about one of the plugins very briefly, but let's dig deeper into more plugins, and then I'll share with you just a reference as what type of plugins are out there that you can basically use. Okay. So any temporal basically artifact that you can have is also mapped into the memory. So obviously system time is an obvious basically value. The processes start and end times, any URL access times, symbolic link creations, very Linux specific, the registry keys, the MFT entry, master file table entry timestamps, user assist. You know what user assist is now, right? And process in a tree-based format, and the PE level. For this one, you need to have PE file plugin installed. I think it's actually based off of a Python library. So that does PE analysis in the memory as well, which is dependent on another library, but there exists such a thing. Any libraries at what time they loaded, sockets, you looked at them. Events that created, shim cache that we basically discussed as an artifact at the hard disk level. So far, so good, guys. I'll just pause back here. Okay, no question. All right, move on. Okay, so you can use the plugin called Timeliner to create the timeline. Which one did you guys see before that was doing it for you automatically? Let me go back to the tech messages here. Plazo lock to timeline, fantastic. So when you were using and pointing your Plazo to this, if it finds the memory artifact, it basically gets these values from the timeliner too. If not, then you have to create it. If you're just focusing on the memory piece, then you can use that timeliner. Shit. It's one of those time of the years that you don't know you have cold or COVID. It's funny. So you want to make sure that you set it as a time zone. Remember, once we were dealing with the Plazo, you actually use that. So we want to say, in essence, that every log is in UTC unless you actually otherwise stated it. And that's about it. So we have now the timeline of the memory activities. So everything from what has been created from those timeline perspective. You can now create that timeline and have an output as a file. Okay. So for any specific memory mapping that requires to go into the disk artifact, these are the two other plugins such as MFT parser and shellbacks that can help you with those two values, like MFTs and shellbacks. Okay. If you want to do the analysis, so for instance, you have an incident that happened at 8 a.m. local time, and you want to basically create everything from your side based off of the local time activity, then yes, you have to make it converted to time zone, because what happens is that if you work on a case in Calgary and everything is in UTC and you are out of Toronto, there are 3 time zones that you're capturing here. The best is always to modify it to as one time zone that you can, I would say, create your offsets off of that, if that makes sense. Cool. But honestly, if you start doing a lot of time, you don't see that situation to happen. Always they aggregate it through the UTC format. Logs that you see is always in UTC. Make sense? Okay, give me one sec, guys.
I have a quick question.
You can ask 2 quick questions.
And does Timeliner detect the image timeline form, the image time zone format?
These are the ones that the Timeliner could look for you, right? And these are the plugins that you could define if you are looking for a specific. So for instance, in this one, you would say, I want to use this timeliner, right, to create that timeline. What it does is that it uses the registry for doing the timestamps in these formats. If you want to use MFD, then you would MFD parse. If you want to do shellback, you would do shellback. And this is how we basically create that. And then once you have these, then you aggregate them through simple, like something like this. This is going to be a bunch of tandem contents in each other, but it doesn't create something like a log to timeline. That's the purpose of a Plazo tool. So that's it. So this is the timeliner, right? And if you actually go into that value, you see that you can see the processes, the loads, the histories, and things from the volatility output, right? So remember, I was saying that if you are running a Plazo against the memory image as well, then that's what they do. So they use different values, and you can see what is basically being imported into that timeliner, and that's called timeliner, as you could expect, right? So these are the parcels: timeliner, shellback, MFT parcel. All of them are already in Plazo. So Plazo uses exactly them to act on it. So you see, it uses the timeliner, it uses the parser, it uses the shellback. So what, if you are asking what is in the parser, let me actually bring that the parser. If I can find the timeliner, give me 1 sec. I want to see if we have it in our process. If not, here is a good reference. Okay. So see this one. It is basically telling you that this is the registry. This is basically probably a process. This is the hive and things like that, right? And it tells you like what are the values. So if you take a look at this, these are the values that are captured as part of the timeline. Now, if you are running Plazo against all your artifact, that super timeline would call this. If you actually remember, all these are called. This is called the Plazo volatility parser, MFT parser, shellback, and timeline. All of them are called, and then they are merged into that super timeline of yours. Now, if you want to see what is captured in timeliner specifically from the memory, that was the output. Where is it? Is it here? Yes, here. Makes sense? So far, so good, guys? Sorry, when you say I think so, either it makes sense or it doesn't. Cool. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand. This is just a point in time in certain fields, right? It's not all the system artifact. This is one of the plugins, right? But they are not capturing everything at the same time. So if someone wants to capture the MFT parser and shellback, they still need to run those plugins to capture those, right? Makes sense? And then once they captured, they could be just put into a super tinem of Plazo. So Plazo, once actually gets that input, that would create that, and then you run Plazo, and then you run sort or psort, which is basically pstil in essence, to get the super timeline. And now you have a super timeline that you can do investigation on. Make sense? Cool. I think it makes sense. I'm just doing it on behalf of you guys. All right. So dumping event logs from memory and using log2 to create these event X. So if it is a Windows system and you want to basically dump any timelines from the memory, that's how you would actually do it. So keep in mind, some of these artifacts are already created inside your machine. These are the ones that could be still fresh in the memory because of being recently executed or whatever. Does that mean that the other one is sufficient? No. These are actually a good resources that you can always cross-correlate. And that's why they say memory is the gold, because you could do a lot in the memory at the time that things were happening. So that's why you see a lot of these artifacts are still retrievable from the disk. But you still see functions that could retrieve those from the memory. These are including the prefetches, the shim caches, the events themselves, and things like that. What you don't see is very narrowed down type of events, such as when a process got created, what is being dropped from that process, what network socket was connected from that process. You can't enable those as logs unless you enable artifacts such as, log levels such as sysmon, enabled for you to actually capture that. So again, in the memory, they exist. But in the disk, you may actually not have enabled them anyways. So it's another important aspect to consider. Make sense, guys? Yeah. So these are some just basically hints for you guys to give you some ideas. In essence, you wanna basically what is it called? You wanna focus on an activity, and it is always good to see the timeline. And once you have that timeline, you can do the investigation. Sometimes you just want to find out what the timeline that you are looking for is, even before creating a timeline. Because what you're going to end up with is that it's going to be a large volume of data, sorted log values. They're having hundreds of thousands of records. But where exactly you need to start is going to be another problem itself. So you guys so far know how to capture these basically scheduled tasks, then network activities, the register keys, and things like that. But how do you actually identify that event of interest? And that's where you need to kind of have a trigger point or a clue, so that you can always go back through that clue and analysis and a kind of cycle, so that it just basically narrows down and zeroes down on a patient zero. In an incident that we are basically talking right now to one of the clients, there's a load balancer that wasn't having any logs enabled, right? So it was basically just receiving connection, but wasn't logging who was talking to. Now, one of the exchange server between the load balancer was sending a lot of spam emails, right? And the organization doesn't know how to identify that. So they have the logs in there. They don't know how to identify the offending endpoints. So it's kind of like a problem right now for us to identify what time this offense started, so that we can find any other logs inside the other side of the organization. So memories could be very helpful in this regard. But for now, we are basically narrowing down through another approach, which is basically a process level connection history backs in the other firewalls and things like that, and then aligning the timeline. The timeline is really important when it comes to response. and these plugins would create for you the artifacts. But the actual creation of timeline is a different problem, rather than finding where in the timeline you should actually focus and start doing the analysis. Okay, so any question, guys? Any questions so far? All right, so let me see, give me one sec. Bear with me, guys. Okay. So let's talk about. I'm just preparing for you an example. Bear with me. Okay, so what is code injection? Anyone knows what it is? Let me just actually give you a good resource that is very good. And always use this as a resource. To give you actually a good idea what they are. Yeah, that's from the end game. So these are the different processing injection. I'm going to copy this link for you so that you guys can see it later. But we'll talk about them in a separate process. But I just want to see what they are in essence. So a typical injection happens all the time, guys. That's where your DLLs get imported. In any DLL gets imported to execute a function that another application is reliant on, right? So, for instance, if there is a process on the system, right, that has the ability to load basically DLLs, what's going to happen is that the malware process would write a disk level library, and then through the get proc address or whatever, it gets a hold of the address, allocates the memory through, let's say, virtual alloc, and then through a remote call exec, it just writes it writes, and then through a get remote call exec, it actually executes the process. So this is the create remote write process known as virtual alloc that I just explained, right? So it's a very typical classical DLL injection. There are different methods of it, so I'm not gonna go uncover, but I shared the link with you guys so that you can get a sense as what they are. But in essence, what is this for? Is basically hiding an existing process or malicious process hiding a malicious process into an existing benign process. So these are the different techniques. I'll leave it to you guys to read through and get familiar with it. This is another one which is very tough to detect, right? It's called APC injection, and many red teamers actually use this technique to do theirs because they learned it from Tridex. But anyways, And by the way, I think you can use these Red Canary. You can use Red Canary to actually see some of these injection processes. So if you find the injection methods, I don't know, like you can just find the MITRE injection. So process injection, the T105. So these are the sub techniques that they have, right? And you could see the YAML files for them, right? This is how the MAVinject works. This is through the it's a process hollowing technique, which we actually have a volatility, a plugin for it now. And what process hollowing is that it actually creates the process with the same name and then deletes the previous process. So I actually show it to you. It's a cool one. That's why it's called hollowing, because it just hollows the other process and it just goes away. So let's say this is an actual target process. So this gray one, right? It just writes its own malicious code and overwrites it, but it keeps the same name. So it's funny. And then how you can basically identify it is that you can see the discrepancy between the loaded memories versus the listed processes. And now there's a plugin for that, which I'll show you later. But anyways, so this is in essence, as I said, it is a technique. It has 11 subtechniques. So some of them you just saw in that end game. Some of it is here. Endgame was covering a few of these, but these are the different ways of doing it. So process hollowing was something that was just basically explaining. So they suspend, overwrite, and then hollow. Keep that in mind. Like these are the different process injections. So why it is important in a specific? Because these techniques could show a potential malicious activity because they wanted to hide themselves from the execution process. From the execution monitoring tools such as like AVs and all that. So and also from like unarmed eyes, if you are looking at your process, you don't see any bad thing. You could see just a bunch of regular files because you could do that. Do you know what Metasploit command does that for you as a simple process injection? Anyone? Be quick.
It does have an inject local module for that. Am I right? It does have a module called inject, local inject.
I haven't seen inject Metasploit inject. I haven't seen. There's a migrate that does that, but Metapreter, but I haven't seen inject. Payload inject, or it could be just payload inject, but one of the managers. Okay, that's just the payload inject. So Metapreter migrate process injection. This is how it's done old school, right? This is a very simple old school way of doing it.
Yeah, for example, the network services open a notepad, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, this is just a simple like de facto old school process injection. So Metapreter does that. Now in Cobalt, it has many options. Actually, does process hollowing and other techniques. But anyways, I hope my machine was actually live so I could actually show you, but we can definitely demonstrate it next time. hopefully it's fixed by then. Let's talk about this whole thing. Now, let's talk about the code injection. Now, you have a sense as what code injection is, why it is important, right? Now, let's see how we can detect them. So these are the different, but I gave you a larger, I would say, sorry guys. And you have that basically different methods that I just covered to you. So this is just one thing, and then we go from there. Okay. All right, guys, if you're watching, and something urgent just came up. All right, I'm gonna do that. All right, so I'm not gonna go in there. Just have a look at that. I would say list. I probably removed this just to make sure you guys have a good understanding, but we'll come back to it and discuss this. Okay. Now, detecting code injections. One of the key, basically, modules that you would do is through the module called malfind, which looks for the VAD sections that are readable, executable, and writable, which means it can self-rewrite itself and overwrite to host malicious content. So process hollowing, you can use LDR modules so that you can find out the discrepancy between inload in init and in mem, and then through the PS list. There is an actual process hollowing module posted that actually combines the two and does it automatically for you. We'll show you shortly. So, okay. Any question, guys? There is a question. How malware can bypass that? ASLR. Well, I mean, there are techniques. So one of the very beginning way of doing it is just PEP walking. So they basically start walking on the PEP to identify like the list of the process, and then basically find out where they are, and then they start writing that process through the process injection. So if I want to put it in very, I would say, process, let me just show you something. Give me 1 second. Walking. So this one was, I think this is the one that was in black hat. So, so these are the ones that you could do through the through that process. If you want to know the details, I would say, let me show you ASLR. So on how to detect, oh, this is just attack. But let me see. Okay, that's like a RO piece. Let me just find out. So you see these return-oriented programmings, right? That's a technique, but obviously this is just a Git that you could technically see what are the different methods. In essence, all of them are basically through PEP walking and all that. We can discuss this. I actually have a POC written, and I can share that with you as well. But it's always like new techniques. So if you actually look up, you would see still things are being used. That's just an attempt, but there are ways around it to detect where the actual process. That's how the whole process injection, like where do you get that create proc get proc address, right? So when you want to do get proc address, that's how you basically do that. You want to identify the actual process by walking the PEB and tab and so on and so forth. There is a good training called Creative Red Teaming by Mandiant. For you. They actually have a lot of good content, but whenever it's offered, I highly recommend you to basically purchase or attend if your company or whoever is supporting you. So it's 46,000. Sorry, 4,600. It's fun. It doesn't talk, but I think in there it actually covers because I remember seeing all the contents in there. Anyways, so far so good, guys. Just don't want to spend too much, but let's do some analysis. Okay, this is the lab content, but we'll talk about it later. Okay, let me see if I can have a look. So out of these folks, Eric Long, Eric Sedor, Anjit Singh, Rashmi, Chauhan, are you guys online? If so, I may review some contents. I don't need you guys to look at it. I tried, but but I need the consent from you that you are basically not taking screenshots or whatever. I haven't decided yet if I use it because I want to look online if there are good resources. But regardless, we can talk about it later. Just make sure that you can raise your hand if you have a consent of not taking screenshots or recording. Rashmi. Okay, guys, drop your hands. I think it doesn't make sense. I can't do that risk. Cool. Let me just find out a good blog post so that we can discuss on the Malfind itself directly. Malfind. Where did I put that? Okay, so one of the this basically link. So I'm sharing the link here. So what does Malfind do? So what does malfind do is that it actually goes through the memory and identifies the places that are having these set of protection enabled, page execute read write, which enables possibly of overwritten values, right? How it works and all that in detail, it's obviously in this book, which is written by the authors of Volatility themselves. So you can basically purchase that book. But what's going to happen is that you would see that MZ header is in there. So that's MZ, which is the magic byte for the executables, right? Both portable executables and dynamic list libraries. So that's MZ. So MZ itself is basically translate to this assembly codes as 4D and 5A. And the rest is 90, which is a NOP. And 0003 is basically this representation. So what happens is that now you have this memory section that is inside another process but has an MZ header in it. What does that mean? It means there is an injected process, or I would say DLL, inside that executable or inside that memory section. So you can technically dump the malfind and do the analysis through it, right? So if you do malfind with -D, what happens is that it actually downloads all the memory sections that are suspicious to be injected. Now you have those files that are called DMP, 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 and all those that have the MZ at the beginning of the byte level, they're tagged to be a DLL, because as you remember from that, where is it? This one, so this is the actual DLL being loaded inside the memory. So that's why you see that MZ header all of a sudden in that process. So this is the DLL. Or in this one, is basically written in the memory and the thread is called. So that's a B injection. Okay. So all of these, you can now dump that memory section. You see that MZ header in there. Now you have this file. Now, are these executable? Can anyone tell me?
Sorry, what was the question?
Are they executable? What is the difference between these and actual hard disk level artifact?
So on the hard disk artifact, we can get the actual file.
So this file, if it is basically packed, you don't have it packed in the memory anymore, right? That's an unpacked memory. So the size of the DLL from the disk to the memory in an injected mode is different, because now you have it unpacked and only the instructions that are pertinent to that executable are in the memory. So that's why if you do the dumping these memory sections, when you run them in VirusTotal, you may not see exactly if they are being seen. But what's going to happen is that because they are a piece of malware, their byte sequence maybe get caught by the signature. And that's why now here heuristic doesn't really help and signature would help. So the signature of the malware is still valuable for any process injection, because that's where you would basically see the sequence of bytecodes that are already executed in the memory. So far, so good. Give me 1 second. Okay, give me 1 sec. Just looking for that plugin. Where is this? Oh, bear with me, guys. This last minute thing just changed a lot of my plan. Sorry, guys, keep you waiting. Ask me any question. Just while I'm looking for this one, guys. Have you seen the project description? Do you guys have any questions about that? While this is being listed, okay. Don't have it. The commands. Okay. One second. Yeah. One of the other important ones. Sorry, there was a comment. Just the video. That's a presentation. Presentation is a video, but you have to share with me all the gits and repos that you actually demonstrated, right? So the video is the outcome. There's artifacts in between. Okay, so one of the other things that you guys need to look at is the thread scan plugin. So this will help you to identify any potential hidden processes. These are the processes that could be just created and gone after they did their activities, right? So that's another important one. So the other thing is the loader module that we discussed about it. And we want to make sure that the loader module is verbose. Let me just make sure that we have the verbose. Loader module verbose. The hidden values. Verbose. Interesting. This is not really used in the organization, because that's funny, because the verbose one will give you a lot of I would say remember I was telling you that you want to find out in load, in init, and in mem whether they are true or false, and which one has been sitting everywhere. Like if you are seeing something that is not in all the places, then there's something fishy about it. Did we not cover that? So And that's the one. For whatever reason, sim it does not have it. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't show. So I don't wanna. Yeah, what guys, you guys all have access to O'Reilly, right? You can definitely look at that if O'Reilly has that detail. But in essence, we want to see. Okay, what's the problem? Oh, nice. Activity minus V. Sorry, they are module minus P. Doesn't show it for whatever reason because this is the old version. But anyways, in the recent version, it will show you true false. Let me just see if I can find it. An example in load in init and in m. Oh, here. So this is the one that gives you the verbose. So if you see any unlinked files that could basically have discrepancy against these values, this is going to be your point of interest. So for in this one, you see that there's no mapped path and there is no references as such in the LSAS, and there is the other LSAS the same thing, right? Again, there's no mapped file and there is these discrepancy between the in loaded, in init, and in memory. So what does that mean is that you have these processes, there's no reference to the disk artifact that loaded in. So that's one of the indication of the process how long. So that's the one. So you would use that LDR module with -v. So that would give you the result. So the other one is that I want to talk about is the services scan. Let me see if I have it here. SVC scan. I don't have it. SVC. What? Let's see. Relativity. SVC scan. Okay. Again, it's in this book. I think this book is good. Looks like all of them goes back to this book. Was it a different book? No, this is a different book. But anyways, all of them are running on against the Stuxnet. That's funny. But this is the one that you could basically see again as verbose list. Do you want to see if you find a service that doesn't have an image path, right? So see, this one doesn't have an image path. This one doesn't have an image path, but it's just basically loaded into the memory. And there was a bunch of messages.
So image path means that there is no file under disk. The execution ran directly into the memory.
Yeah, it's basically there's no references. It's orphaned process, right? So it means it's coming from somewhere else. There was no loaded or a command level loading process that happened. It could be just a process escalation through an injector process. So you all of a sudden you see that in the memory offset you would have something that is running as a service. So it means it's escalated. There's no binary path associated with it.
But if we run a program as a service, we can see the image path. Is that right?
you can't see the image, so it means that it's either a hollowed process. You need to dump that whole memory section and do the analysis on it. Make sense?
Yeah, but if we
Sure.
close that the parent process, then the other process became orphaned.
If you kill the process, then there's no other code in that memory section, although it is depending on what that memory is exit process strategy is. But yeah, when it's killed, it's killed. So you don't have that code in the memory anymore. If that's what you're asking. Are you asking this? I'm not clear on that.
I'm just thinking about how the process can be orphaned. So in terms of like a malware, so is it?
Okay. So let me show you. So this one, let's see, Halloween. So let's say you use memory image, right? If someone puts this image into suspend mode, because when you actually write a process, like process can be in different process. Suspend mode, Windows. Okay. So this is how you suspend a process. Like you have handle to that process, you can basically suspend, right? So once it's suspended, you would basically, where is it? I missed that window. Is it here? I don't know where I put it. Anyways, once you suspend that process, what's going to happen is you overwrite that memory with the malicious content process, and it kind of like hollow or eat it out to execute your own process. So now you don't have any other basically references on the hard disk, but there is a memory section that is executing that part of the memory. So that a loader module could help you to identify if there is a reference at the disk level to that memory section. If you couldn't find it, then it means that it wasn't existing. So how come actually it doesn't exist from the list of the processes to the loaded modules? I mean, maybe you if you spend some time on the concept, and there is this thing which is really cool. So process injection techniques, GitHub. So this one has the whole process following technique, and you could actually see it, right? So let me just share it with you. And then you can take a memory analysis so that you can see what exactly it means. This way you could verify that what exactly that process means, right? So that's in C#, so you just need to open a .NET framework and then take it from there. Okay. Config dynamic invoke program. That's the one. This is the DLL injection process. Okay. Have a look at this, and basically this is how it's been done. But you can, I would say, do that volatility piece to detect that process. Okay. I'm gonna pause here. See if you guys have any question on the project. So This is the course project, guys. Is it clear to everyone what is being asked? Yes, I'll share the slide, but is it clear?
So technically, we need to simulate an attack and then collect the artifact this level on memory and
exactly. So make sure that you use these tools that you learned so far, like volatility, Lazo, to demonstrate the artifact of how you actually could detect that attack, basically. And then you can use that simulated environment such as Caldera and Red Atomic.
Red Canary can work. Can we use the Red Canary?
Here, Red Canary.
Atomic. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Red Canary. Yeah. Okay, guys. Any question, comment? How was this session? Was it informative for you guys? Any feedback? I know it didn't do a live demo, unfortunately, for whatever reason, guys. My machine wasn't responsive. Well, I'll promise we do actually a quick demos. Or I can actually give you a memory so you can run it yourself. But in either way, it's very yeah, I would say so, guys. Ping me if there is anything, and I think that's it for today.